I remember the rain more than the road. It followed me from Seattle all the way down to Tacoma, blurring the highway lights into one long, quiet river of gold. My name is Laura Mitchell, 32 years old. And tonight, I was driving toward my parents' 35th wedding anniversary with a single, foolish hope that maybe this time we'd act like a real family. I had rehearsed every version of small talk I could manage, words that wouldn't sound like accusations. By the time I reached the banquet hall, my knuckles were stiff from holding the wheel too tight. I parked, fixed my hair in the mirror, and whispered to my reflection, "You're fine. You're family." But I didn't quite believe it. The hall was loud when I stepped inside, laughter spilling from every corner, a sea of cousins and neighbors I hadn't seen since my 20s. The air smelled of roast beef and perfume. My mother, Diane, moved through the crowd in a blue dress, her smile perfectly practiced, one hand holding a tray of glasses. Beside her, my father, Frank, stood like a man who owned every laugh in the room. People greeted him as the shop man who never quits, and he grinned, loving the sound of it. And then there was Chloe, my younger sister, paint still smudged along her knuckles, hair pulled into a messy bun that somehow looked deliberate. Everyone adored her, such a free spirit. Aunt Judy said, hugging her, "You got your daddy's charm." Chloe laughed, leaning into the warmth of it, and for a second I let myself smile. She always had that kind of light, even when she borrowed it from others. I found a quiet table near the edge of the room, pretending to check my phone, pretending I wasn't counting how many times my parents had looked my way. Once, maybe twice. I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't here for recognition. I was here because that's what daughters do. They show up, even when they no longer belong. Then the sound of a spoon against glass cut through the chatter. My father stood, holding a champagne flute high. His face glowed under the soft light, proud and certain. 35 years, he said. That's something worth toasting. Laughter rippled again. To our daughter, he went on, his eyes bright, voice booming, the one who's always been there, the one who makes this family proud. For one small, foolish heartbeat, I thought he meant me, but his gaze slid past me, landed on Chloe, standing across the room with her glass half raised. To Chloe, he said, "The heart of this family." The room cheered, hands clapping, voices echoing her name. Then, as the sound softened, he turned toward me, his smile faded, and her. He said, pointing my way, "This family's never gotten a thing from her." The words hung there, sharp as glass. For a second, no one moved. I could feel 60 pairs of eyes on me, weighing, wondering. Someone coughed. Chloe shifted, her smile trembling, but she didn't speak. My mother looked down, pretending to adjust a napkin, her silence louder than anything my father could have said. The laugh I'd been forcing all evening died in my throat. I felt the blood rush to my ears, but I kept my face still. Years of practice. I thought about the envelopes I'd mailed, the transfers I'd made, the bills I'd paid, all the quiet, invisible things that had kept their house from sinking. But what good was the truth in a room like this? I stood, smoothed my dress, and placed my glass carefully on the table. The clink was small but final. No one stopped me when I walked out. Outside, the rain was still falling, steady and cold. I didn't run to my car, I just walked, one slow step at a time, the sound of celebration fading behind me. Maybe this was what family meant, showing up, getting cut open, and leaving before anyone saw you bleed. The parking lot was almost empty when I reached my car. I sat behind the wheel, the engine off, the wipers still ticking from the last drizzle. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I could still hear the echo of my father's words, that sharp sentence cutting through applause. This family has never gotten a thing from her. I let my head fall back against the seat, the leather cold against my neck. For a long moment, I just breathed shallow, uneven breaths that hurt more than the insult itself. That sentence didn't start tonight. I thought. It had been building for years, brick by brick, until it finally said itself out loud. 6 years earlier, the first brick had been a phone call from my mother, Diane. Her voice had been small, polite, like she was asking a stranger for a favor. "We're a little behind on the mortgage, honey, just for this month." She didn't mention that my father's auto shop was failing, or that the retirement fund she'd counted on was already gone. I was 26 then, working as a junior software engineer, saving for a down payment on a condo. I said yes before I even thought about it. One transfer turned into another, and soon, the payments were routine, $48,000 in 6 years, all sent quietly to the account my mother said was just temporary. Then came the electric bills, the internet, the grocery cards, only until Dad's shop picks up again, she promised. But Frank's pride was louder than his gratitude. He told the neighbors he was the one keeping the house afloat. I let him have that lie because it seemed to hold him together. And then there was Chloe, my sister, bright, talented, reckless. When she called about renting a downtown studio for her art, I paid the first month's rent as a surprise, then the second month, and the next. 6 years later, I'd sent her more than $10,000 for brushes, paints, gallery ads, all the things she called investments. I wanted her to believe in herself. I wanted to believe that doing this made me part of something whole. Every night, after work, I'd open my laptop again. I'd run code until midnight, eyes burning, just to keep ahead of what they needed. My salary became their safety net. I told no one, not even Mark, back when we first started dating. It wasn't about recognition. It was about duty, family. I thought, means stepping in where others fall. But the longer I carried them, the quieter I became. Birthdays passed without calls. Holidays became messages about bank transfers. When they talked about me at family dinners, it was as the one who moved away. I didn't argue. I just kept paying, sitting in that car outside the banquet hall. I finally understood what those 6 years had cost. It wasn't the money. It was the story they'd told about me, one where I didn't exist except as a name on a check. They hadn't just taken what I earned. They had taken my place in the family. When I finally pulled into my apartment in Seattle, the clock on the dashboard read past midnight. The city was asleep, its skyline blurred by fog. Through the living room window, I saw Mark Reynolds, my boyfriend, sitting on the couch with a mug in his hands. He looked up as I came in, not surprised, not impatient, just steady. That was what I loved about him. He never filled silence with questions. I set my purse down and stood there for a moment, still in my coat, rain dripping from the hem. "It happened again," I said quietly. My voice sounded like someone else's, calm, almost detached. He waited, eyes steady. "At the party," I continued. "Dad toasted the family. He said I've never given them anything." Mark didn't speak at first. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "After everything you've done," I laughed, one of those dry, humorless sounds. "They don't know, Mark. They don't ask. They just take." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Then tell them." I met his eyes. They wouldn't believe it, and even if they did, it wouldn't matter. For a long time, the room was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Then Mark said, his voice low but certain, "Then tell the world. You deserve to be seen." I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for my phone on the table. My hands trembled as I opened Instagram. The blank space stared back at me, waiting. I typed slowly. The numbers like confessions. 6 years, $48,000 for their mortgage, $35,000 for their bills, $10,000 for my sister's studio, and tonight, my father said I've given this family nothing. I read it once. My thumb hovered over post. Mark watched me, his voice barely above a whisper. "Once you press that, There's no going back. I pressed it anyway, for a second. Nothing happened. Then the screen lit up hearts, comments, messages. You paid that much. They said that to you. You're incredible. I put the phone down, my pulse thudding in my ears, somewhere between guilt and relief. A strange calm settled over me. They hadn't seen it yet, but they would. Morning came gray and quiet, the kind of light that makes everything look softer than it is. I hadn't slept. The post was still up, gathering likes, messages, and tiny bursts of validation I didn't know what to do with. I made coffee. I didn't drink and opened my laptop instead. If last night had been the confession, today would be the clean break. I logged into my bank account, the numbers staring back like witnesses. 6 years of transactions, each one a thread tying me to a version of myself I was ready to bury. The first was the restaurant charge $6,000 for that party, the one where my father erased me in front of 60 people. The bill was still pending. I opened the payment portal, found the charge, and canceled it. The confirmation popped up, short and absolute payment declined. I took a breath that felt like the first one in years. Next came the mortgage, $48,000 across 6 years' money that had kept my parents' house standing and my father's pride intact. I found the recurring transfer my mother had begged me to set up just until things got better. I hovered over the button, remembering her voice, the gratitude that always sounded like guilt. Then I clicked Cancel Recurring Transaction. Gone. Then the utilities, the credit cards, the small monthly withdrawals I'd stopped noticing. I deleted my card from their linked accounts one by one: grocery store, electric company, gas, even the auto shop. Each confirmation message felt like the sound of a door locking behind me. Last came Chloe's studio. $10,000 over the years, rent and supplies for her art that my parents called her purpose. I'd believed in that too. Maybe because I wanted to believe in her more than I believed in myself. I found the payment schedule, paused for a moment, then stopped it for good. The screen flashed transaction canceled. I closed the laptop and sat back, staring at the ceiling. The apartment was still, the only sound a faint hum from the refrigerator. I whispered the words just to hear them aloud. I'm done carrying them. Relief came slow, quiet, like a tide going out. But underneath it, something else stirred, a sadness I hadn't felt since childhood, the kind that follows freedom. By noon, the phone started buzzing like a trapped bee. At first it was one call, then another, then 10, 30 missed calls by the time I stopped counting. 15 from Mom, 10 from Dad, 5 from Chloe. I let them ring, each vibration another reminder that silence was no longer my prison, it was my boundary. The voicemails came next, stacking up one after another. The first was my father's voice, loud and brittle. Laura. What the hell did you do? The restaurant just called. They said the bill wasn't paid. We're being humiliated. You fix this now. His tone cracked at the end, the kind of crack that sounded more like fear than anger. Then came my mother, her voice sharper than I'd heard in years. How could you let this happen? The bank called. Laura, they said the payment didn't go through. They're sending notices. A pause. Do you know what this looks like? The next message was quieter. Chloe's voice. They canceled my studio lease. The landlord locked the door. You knew I had a show next month. Why would you do this? Her voice wavered. You knew how much this meant to me. I listened to every message once. Then I set the phone face down on the counter. The silence that followed was almost merciful. I poured another cup of coffee and stared out the window. Somewhere across the city, they were panicking calls to the restaurant, the bank, the gallery. The house of cards I'd been holding up for 6 years was collapsing, and they were watching it fall, piece by piece. Another voicemail from Dad. Your little stunt is tearing this family apart. People are calling, asking questions. You think you're better than us. I didn't delete it. I didn't respond either. His words rolled off me like rain on glass. Then Mom again, softer this time. Your father's upset. You've made a mess we can't clean up. Call me Laura. I didn't. They weren't calling for me. They were calling for their safety net. By evening, the phone finally went still, the red light no longer blinking. I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of detergent and relief. I hadn't fixed their crisis, and for once, I didn't want to. Maybe that's what freedom sounds like, the absence of a ring. It had been nearly 3 weeks since the calls stopped when I heard the knock. Slow, heavy, unmistakable. Through the peephole, I saw them, Mom and Dad, standing side by side in the dim hallway. My mother's coat was buttoned wrong, her hair pulled back like she hadn't slept. My father looked smaller somehow, shoulders hunched beneath his old work jacket. I opened the door but didn't step aside right away. Laura, Mom started, her voice soft but trembling. We need to talk. I moved back enough for them to enter. The air in the apartment felt tighter as they sat on the couch. I stayed standing. We didn't mean to upset you at the party, Mom said quickly, hands twisting in her lap. It was a misunderstanding. Dad nodded, his tone already defensive. You took it the wrong way. You always do. The words hit me like something rehearsed, a line I'd heard too many times growing up. I folded my arms. Is that what you came here to say? Mom's eyes flickered. You embarrassed us, Laura. The Post, everyone saw it. The neighbors, your aunts, even Pastor Dean. They're asking questions. Dad leaned forward, jaw tight. You've made us look like fools. I stared at them, the same two people I'd spent my adult life saving, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilt, just distance. 6 years, I said quietly. $147,000. That's what I gave you. 48 for your mortgage, 35 for your bills, 10 for Chloe's studio, and 6,000 for that party, the one where you told everyone I've never given this family a thing. Mom's mouth fell open, but Dad spoke first. You're exaggerating. We never asked you to do all that. I nodded slowly. You didn't have to. You just knew I would. For a long moment, no one spoke. The sound of traffic drifted through the window, distant and cold. Finally, Mom whispered. We're family. Families help each other. I looked at her, the woman who'd asked me for help with one hand and erased me with the other. You're right, I said. But help goes both ways. Dad's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake, walking away like this. You'll regret it. Maybe, I said, opening the door. But it'll be mine to regret. They stood, uncertain. For a second, Mom's face softened like she might reach for me, but she didn't. They stepped into the hallway. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, the lock clicking into place. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was whole, like something finally returned to me. A month passed before I heard from them again. By then, the Post had faded into the endless scroll of other people's lives, but its echo hadn't. I could still feel it every time I checked my phone and saw nothing, no new messages, no missed calls. The quiet was different now, not heavy, but clean. Then, one morning, as I was making coffee, a voicemail notification appeared. The number was familiar Dad's. His voice, when it came through, was smaller than I remembered. You were right, but it's too late now. Just that. No anger, no blame. And for some reason, that hurt more than all the shouting before. Word spread through the family soon after. My parents had lost the house, the bank foreclosed, the same one whose mortgage I'd paid for 6 years. The auto shop shut down a week later. Frank Mitchell, once the man who never quit, was now just another name on a bankruptcy file. Mom, Diane, moved them into a 1-bedroom apartment in Renton, a place she once called too small to breathe in. She started working part-time at the grocery store, scanning barcodes with the same hands that used to write me thank you notes she never sent. Chloe lost her downtown studio. The gallery canceled her show after the rent check bounced. I heard from a mutual friend that she'd taken a barista job to cover her debts serving coffee in a shop that smelled of paint she could no longer afford. I didn't reach out. I told myself it wasn't punishment. It was gravity things falling where they were always meant to. Still, there were nights I'd catch myself wondering if they ever talked about me now. Did they use my name in the past tense? Did they finally see what it cost to live in denial for so long I never answered those questions? Instead, I replayed Dad's message one last time, the one that ended with silence instead of pride. Then I pressed delete. The sound that followed that single, final click was the cleanest sound I'd ever heard. The message came on a Sunday morning. Quiet and unexpected. Can we talk? Just us? Coffee shop on 5th? Tomorrow at 3? It was from Chloe. I stared at the text for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, the same part that still flinched at her name. But another part, smaller and softer, whispered that maybe this was the kind of ending that required a face, not a silence. I typed back one word. Okay. The next afternoon, I arrived early. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and rain-soaked jackets. I chose a corner table far from the door, the hum of conversation wrapping around me like a low tide. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. The lightness she'd always carried, that careless glow, was gone. She looked older, tired in a way that paint and coffee couldn't fix. She sat down, clutching a paper cup with both hands. I know things are a mess. She started, her voice uneven. I didn't realize how much you were doing for us. For me. I didn't interrupt. I just watched her, waiting for the part where she'd ask for something. I got used to it, she said finally. The help, the attention from Mom and Dad. I thought you didn't need any of that. They always said you were fine. I nodded once. I was fine because I didn't have a choice. Chloe's eyes filled but didn't spill. I'm working again, she said. Not painting just part-time. It's not much. But I'm trying. I believed her. But it didn't change what was broken. I cared enough to carry you, I said quietly. But I'm done carrying. She nodded, understanding more than she could admit. When she left, her coffee untouched, I stayed for a while, listening to the rain start again. Freedom. I realized, sometimes sounds like goodbye, whispered without anger. A full year passed before I realized I hadn't thought about my family in weeks. Not out of anger, just absence. The kind that comes after too much noise. My life had settled into something small and steady, mornings coding at the office, evenings walking along the waterfront with Mark, weekends spent cooking, laughing, living, for the first time. I wasn't waiting for a phone to ring. When Mark proposed, he didn't make a speech. He just held out the ring on a quiet Sunday morning, sunlight spilling through the window, and said, "You deserve a life that doesn't hurt." I said yes before I even realized I was crying. We were married that summer in a small backyard garden just outside Seattle. Only 20 guests, close friends. No family. The air smelled of lavender and grilled food, and someone's old radio played soft jazz from the porch. I wore a simple white dress that moved like air. No veil, no fuss. When I looked around the tables at people who had chosen to be there, not obligated, I felt something I hadn't in years, peace that didn't depend on anyone else. During the vows, my voice trembled once, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had come before. Mark took my hand and smiled, steady as ever. "You're here now," he whispered. As dusk fell, the garden lights flickered on. Someone handed me a glass of water, clear, cold, catching the last of the light. I lifted it gently, feeling the cool rim against my fingers. A year ago, my father had raised a glass to erase me. Tonight, I raised one to remember myself. To peace, I said softly, though no one asked for a toast. The guests clapped. Mark smiled. But I wasn't celebrating survival. I was honoring stillness, the quiet that comes when you stop begging to be seen. Later, as we danced under strings of lights, I caught my reflection in the window, the same face, but lighter somehow. Behind that reflection was a past I no longer owed anything to a foreclosed house, a shuttered shop, a sister learning to stand on her own. I didn't hate them. I didn't wish them harm. I just understood, finally, that love without respect is only debt. When the music faded, I stood for a moment, the glass still in my hand. I thought of the years I spent carrying everyone else and whispered to the night, I don't owe them any more. The wind moved through the garden, soft as a sigh, and for the first time, it sounded like home.